This is Melissa, and today is the 23rd of June, 2024. I am under the weather, and it is noon on Sunday, so I'm dragging, to say the least, but I wanted to put something up. And what I've chosen to put up are some excerpts from August 23, 2020. And I actually used some excerpts of this talk, which is more than 4 hours, and Redux number 13 from June of 2021, so 3 years ago. And it's a good talk. There's a lot on my mind that's flowing from the last real history that I did into the next one that hopefully I'll have the energy to record tomorrow. And what is on my mind is psychopathy. What is on my mind is, who are these people that are doing such terrible things to us for so long? And this is a good talk from Alan. The poem is Conology on Parade with Masters Who Persuade. The con within conology, perfected by psychology, has the targets participate in pre-arranged fate, tempted by fodder like lambs to the slaughter, or terrified of dying, giving power to the lying, led into circumstances where they ought not to be. So again, that's August 23, 2020, and I will put up the link to the original talk for those of you who want to invest the 4 hours into listening to it. And remember, as Alan said, during the year 2020, you can always download the talk onto whatever little device you want to use and spread the listening out over a week. I did the topics listings for these. The topics in these longer talks would turn out to be like a little mini novel. But the opening here, based on what Alan said, is welcome to my world, where I explain the sciences behind the system that runs everything, the art of conology. And he's going to talk about addiction, persuaders, behaviorism, consumerism, etc. But why I remembered this talk is, what is psychopathy? What is it that we're seeing when we look at these people who want to do us in? So I'm going to I haven't edited this yet, but I'll just pick out a few key points, keep it really, really short, and want to remind you that on the 29th, that is Saturday, and I can't remember the times, but I think it's like 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 7 p.m. Great British, whatever time they're on, summertime hours. And so I'll put up a little graphic about that, and that is going to be Nick Hayes covering Chapter 8 of Tragedy and Hope. And I'm sure that it'll be a good talk. Like I said, this is to be kind of a bridge between the real history that I did and the one that's upcoming. And the one that went up last week, Mike in Ontario, Canada, used an audio clip of Alan. And this is from September 3, 2009. And he said, "Hi folks, I am Alan Watt. We're cutting through the matrix, just hoping that people out there really start to really get it. You got to start thinking the worst. You got to cross that line. People who are waking up come through different stages. Most of them never get close to the last line. The last line is where you're saying, well, I know all this, but they wouldn't really do that. People wouldn't do that. No one is so horribly cruel as to actually do that. If they can't cross over that line, they won't get the rest of the picture. Believe you me, it's like crossing over a mountain. Everything suddenly makes sense when you accept, yes, Not only would they do that, they have been doing that to you. You'll see everything completely different. Alan is going to get into some interesting ideas here around what is a psychopath. And I encourage you, if you are stuck in a scientific model of the universe, just remember that Alan regularly talked about scientists as the new priesthood. And we are in a scientific dictatorship. And I personally, based on my own experiences and years with Alan, do not think that the psychopathy of these people who want to kill us can be explained from a purely scientific, with a purely scientific explanation. So, anyway, don't worry about me. I am megadosing the D and the C and the juice and the water, and it just happens from time to time that your body likes to shed a toxin or two. One last thing. There were a few things in the news that caught my attention. And there were some things about psychopaths, but I don't really have the energy to share those with you. There are a couple of articles that Alan read from or cited about narcissists and psychopaths, etc. And I will post the links to those again to make it easy for you to find them. The one thing that I wanted to mention that doesn't have anything at all to do with psychopathy, well, at a glance, but it's something that has come up for me in recent discussions with you. New York City holds Fat Beach Day to create accepting environment for plus-size community, a space for people to be themselves. It's one way to make a splash. Fat Beach Day events are appearing across the United States, aiming to create spaces for the plus-size community together, including one Saturday in Far Rockaway. We're going through something culturally that is impacting us every day on an individual level and a systemic level, Jordan Underwood, the event organizer, told The Guardian. We're really trying to open up a space for people to be themselves. Underwood, a plus-size model and artist, had a history of being bullied for her weight since middle school. This led her to start a blog at age 12 to document her experiences and begin her journey into fat activism. Underwood organizes events throughout New York City and collaborated with Barriez, a Brooklyn-based vintage store curated for curves, to organize Fat Beach Day at Jacob Riis Park. I'm so self-conscious at the beach, and I'm never around people that look like me, Emma Zach, who started Barriez in 2018, told the outlet. I'm excited we've created this space for folks with bigger bodies to have a good time. In an age where weight loss drugs like Ozempic are popular and thinness is celebrated as the ideal beauty standard, events like Fat Beach Day are seen by some as pushback. There is more to this article, and I'll post it and you can read it yourselves, but I noticed last week that some congressman or senator was putting forward some kind of bill that would require the pharmaceutical manufacturers of the drug, the weight loss drug Ozempic, to reduce the price and make it more affordable for people. The drug, like any drug, has side effects. And I'm mentioning this because it reminds me of Bertrand Russell saying they can make anything. And they can make us believe anything, that snow is black. And so who are they that would do this, and why would they do this? Why for years have they told us that what they have always called morbid obesity is suddenly something good to be celebrated? So this is just one small, really rather trivial example. But we are surrounded by people. We are in a system that from top to bottom is not designed and managed in our best interest, and to the contrary, it is designed to eliminate as many of us as possible efficiently and quickly, moving like a freight train into this new digital system that we're going into. So cross over the mountain, and I hopefully will feel like recording that real history tomorrow. I'm sorry, I'm backlogged on everything, and I even have, the listener supplied excerpt series. They're done, but I just have not had the steam to get things up on the website or post anything. And I'm hoping to rally the energy to get this done. I wish you all a really good week, and take care.
The scariest part for naive people who've swallowed their indoctrination is even accepting there's incredibly evil people in the world. They don't have horns, except unless they've had them implanted. And they actually do that with some people now, They implant these horns. Surgeons will do that. But do no harm. Where did that go? But they'll actually, it's really some kind of cement, with some kind of cement, a horn on your skull if you want it there, I know someone who was in a hospital in New York City, and she was a nurse, and she went on one day, and there's a guy lying in the bed with a horn on his head. And the nurses were told, don't laugh at him, don't laugh at anybody. And do you realize how hard it'd be not to kind of laugh or quip something to this guy? I couldn't have shut my face, no way, But this is where they brought society to, Because there's nothing, if you're doing something like that surgically, I don't care what you're doing, that there's definitely harm being done there, and different levels of it. It's the same with using surgery to supposedly cure mental problems. You can't do that. They tried that with lobotomies and dichotomies, It's horrible what they've done in the past, but it doesn't stop them to make money off of people who are obviously got problems, but they're not treating it the right way. Anyway, again, this is the world that we're being given to by those masters at the top, because the more dysfunctional it seems to be amongst you, the more scared and it's easier to control them during this terror campaign we're going through. This is a campaign of terror, if you haven't fathomed it out, the whole thing, coupled with the obvious total crashing of financial systems, and even food-wise, because no one's allowed to work normally. It's all planned this way. If you want to save a system, why would you bring in this system of that's never been done before? And you've literally the healthy folk. Never been done before. And then you all these penalties if they get out of the house, and all the businesses, this company are crunch, except the big corporations that are funding all the other internal, perhaps, terrorist groups. Isn't that rather coincidental? Isn't that coincidental, It bores me to even talk about it. It really does. But most folk never really figure it out, unfortunately. And the ones who take the information, like the stuff I'm putting out, and then prattle it in the same week, often, you'll hear it often put out there after I do these talks, with all the links and everything else. I've done all the work, you see. You have no idea who they work for. Because I don't believe that there's anybody in politics today that's not there because they were put there. And they play the roles on their sides, you see, they play their roles. Years ago, I can remember when there were lots of alternate radio, mainly on AM and shortwave radio worldwide. Harder to get it all censored by then, although you did get certain ones who would try to censor them by having their ads withdrawn, things like that. Everything's political in this system, you see. And there's no such thing as free speech. There never really was anything. The ones who have the biggest money and run ads and campaigns and fund the politician, the ones they want in power, they got the power. The ones who got the cash, and they get what they want. But at least you had a lot of variety and people from different areas who really studied in different areas. You had technocracy, all right, but you had interviews with people who'd lived through the Cold War, big chunks of the Cold War, even from World War II onwards, with lots of experience and wisdom, who are all gone now. But in their talks, they would add little bits. Collectively, they'd add little bits, you see, of their experiences and their insights into what happened and how the system runs and works and all that kind of thing. And lots of them realized, too, that the politics really was a scam. It goes way, it's not new, being a scam, a Conology is a system. I think Thomas Jefferson mentioned it too. I've mentioned this part so often, where he did talk about, if you see the same agendas being continued between changes in the House, meaning the parties, if you truly had different parties, you would see really drastically different agendas, but you don't. We haven't. We've seen the same agendas, even from Papa Bush to Junior Bush. Even when Bill Clinton was in, he was lobbing cruise missiles over into Iraq and different places, destroying it for his whole time in office. And you had the Desert Storm idea, and then you had the Junior Bush, of course, 9/11, and the whole PNAC group, and then you had Obama went in afterwards, and Obama, even Obama, the name, that's not what his name was. It's not what he called himself up until then. And the main arch villain, this is a comic book, right? I'm not kidding you. I'm still waiting for someone to convince me that it's just a big coincidence that when the biggest enemy of the world at that time, supposedly the arch devil, the demon himself, archdemon, was called Osama. They put in a president and they call him Obama in America. Do you really swallow all that? Do you realize that somebody's laughing at us all? Do you realize that? Someone's having a big chuckle with all these things that are going on right now. They are. But most folk don't question it. Isn't that something? And the World Economic Forum, as they crash the world's economy, and for you, that is not for themselves, they're getting richer at the top. But they're crashing the whole world's economy for all the little people out there, are bringing in their new system of efficiency. And you'll have to all be in it together, and you'll have to do what you're told in order to collectively survive. That's just the way it's done, eh? Any other person in history who did that was a tyrant, but today it's just scientifically necessary, don't you understand, huh? And the public, as usual, unfortunately, through terror and fear, because you always use terror and fear and the reign of terror to get the public to comply, to save themselves. To save themselves. It's awfully important. Remember, you can buy the books and discs I've got there. They're different. There's no point just churning out another big thick tome of history for you to waste your time on. I cut to the chase to show you the cons, right down to the language that are used upon you, to get to think for yourself. That's the only weapon you've got, is to think for yourself. It really is. It's the hardest thing for most folks to think for themselves. And the reason I say that is because, you see, this is your fight. Individually, this is your fight. I always knew we'd all get down to the chase when we have to make a decision personally. That's what it's about, folks. The last thing you want to hear, isn't it? Oh my goodness, I have to make a decision personally. And you do. It would always come down to this. Always. It was inevitable. And so it's your decisions that matter to you, and for your soul. That's what it's about. And they rather like China, the modern version in China, where it's a model state for the world. The BBC documentaries that were churned out over for years talked about that. Oh, this is a wonderful system. This is a model state for the world. Every member of the Council on Foreign Relations parrots the same stuff. And foreign affairs, etc. So now is the time to use that, you see. It's efficient. People just obey. You don't have to bother trying to persuade the public. You just tell them when they better do or else, and that's it. But the folk, again, in their own little lifetime, and it's a short lifetime, really, but in your own little lifetime, most folk just say, oh, well, this just happened and that just happened. They have no idea how things happen. I guess life to them really, at the end, is a mystery. They look back and say, oh, that's a mystery, you know. What a mystery that was. When you see all the things that could have been done and should have been done, but weren't, you just left this big, well, why wasn't it done? Well, haven't got a clue. I used to mention it too. It was like the movie, I think it was called, was it Prophecy? It was the free version one with Christopher Walken. And I think it was in the last one. They're trying to reconstruct a physical Lucifer. And eventually you saw this thing rising up out the ground or from the ground, resurrected Lucifer, standing on a pyramid basically of bodies. And I thought at the time that like represents thousands of generations of people who were born, lived and died and suffered and got used and abused and all the rest of it. And never ever, not one generation knew what was really going on. And I thought that's how we really run, you know. We're not supposed to know what's really going on. Conology. You must participate in your own deception. You must participate in giving power to others. I've mentioned this so many times before. For years and years and years, you give your power away to others by voting. It's a legality. And in some countries it's mandatory. Why do you think it's mandatory? It's because for you to be ruled, it's necessary for you to accept the fact you're going to be ruled. And the only right you have in democracy, and this is a fact, look, check it up for yourselves. Look it up and see what it means about democracy and voting. When it comes to recalls for anything, on any level, even from local councils. They've had cases in Canada that went all the way up to Supreme Court. But people who ran for different offices didn't fulfill their promises. And they were told that the only right a voter has is to vote. Not for what happens from the vote. That's what democracy means. That's what, they literally said that defines democracy. So any liar, and that's why most of them are liars, they go into politics, are politicians, they're psychopathic. They don't mind lying. It's a way of life with them. And for those who really rule the world, it's a natural thing to do, is to don't tell the children any truth. They see you as children, naive children, because they've kept you in the dark since you were born. And just like mushrooms, you know. But yeah, people haven't got a clue of the system in which they and again, once you're out of school, most of your indoctrination is continued through fiction. Folk prefer fiction because life's pretty nasty and rotten and boring or whatever, or even scary. And so you escape from it all by fiction. And you live vicariously, either through sports. A lot of guys watch sports because in reality they have no ability or outlet to get rid of all their frustrations. So they watch guys, like a team is just a war on a battlefield is the field, the playing field. And it's a pitch, as we call it, pitch battle, you see. And so they live out through these characters in front of them. It's a vicarious way of living. In their own lives, they're given very little power today. It's been taken away from them. They're given up to until they're afraid to even assert their own selves over anything at all. All their liberal too, a complete war on the male as well, naturally, and to get them into this position. Everything is a battle strategy. I hope you understand you've been living through battle strategies. They don't end. And they simply run into the next phase, and the next phase, and the next phase of whatever part of it is. And many things are going on at the same time in this particular battle. How do you get rid of the main problems? Who are your main problems? Well, to name them. Okay, how do you get rid of this one? Yeah, these ones, take away their power from them, make them feel insignificant, even tell them that the whole world's problems is theirs. That's what I've done with a lot of the males. It's ran through their in school, it ran in their heads, and so on. And these religious things won't stand up. No way, we can't have that. That's an abuse. You see? It's always the same thing, isn't it? They could never go so far as they've done without chipping away at religion, step by step by step. Most folk, the best Christians I've ever met, are quiet Christians. They'll stand up for themselves, but they're not the ones that the TV type, that go around there with the prosperity doctrine, to make money. And God wants you to have gold now, not in heaven, like one of them said, one of the preachers did say a while back. But no, most folk are quiet, but they have their beliefs, and there's enough of them. They can be a problem to people who want to take all the rights away from them. Under whatever excuses go, the common good, and the greater good. But again, even though it's been used, you pretty well suspect it. Again, it comes down to well, we know all it, but we just need that last bit of admission. Well, you're not going to get admission. That's the whole point of silent weapons. Or introducing the bugs that eat crops. Old, again, masses and masses of information declassified on chemical and bacterial warfare. And agriculture is part of it. How do you disable an enemy? Destroy their sustenance, their meat industry, milk industry, cheese industry, butter industry, by attacking the animals, attack the crops, all kinds of rusts, they call it, and things like that. You can go on and on about the horrors of what humans will do on behalf of the masters that run the planet, but should tell you what the masters are like. The masters are very cold. I remember too Malachi Martin, who was an enigma to some people, but he certainly sold the Catholic Church out. That is true. It's come out since, He helped with the Vatican too to destroy some of the principles that kept them together intact for a long time. And so he was like a double agent. He was also on an awfully good documentary years ago with William Buckley Jr. Interestingly, William Buckley Jr. was in CIA. Malachi Martin on the Art Bell show years later talked about the fact that a lot of the Jesuits and so on in the Catholic Church during the Cold War worked with the CIA because they were all over the world, and they get into countries and come back with information. But Malachi Martin did say that on one of his interviews. You'll never know where his head really was at with Malachi Martin, unfortunately, but he did bring isn't that odd, a guy who worked and sold out the church at one point, really like big time traitor, a real double agent indeed, for pay too. He was paid to do it. Brought back in a humanistic world, in a world where humanism was demanding that folk give up superstition, as the communists called it too, silly superstitions, and try to get rid of it all. And it's all taught through all colleges and universities. All science will replace all these things eventually, and we'll live in a humanistic society where experts and human brains will be ruling us. Well, God help us then, Especially if you have to wonder, they're really so human, But Malachi Martin did bring them into the church, where it was intentionally or inadvertently the spark of something that was sorely lacking. As folk become more and more worldly and secular, including the church, naturally. Because the church itself, all churches are basically staffed with people who come out of the general population. They've been through the same changes, the same indoctrinations into the secular world, where science is supposed to supplant all problems and solve them all and become the guiding light, you see. That's a lot of power to give to mere mortals, the scientists. But Malachi Martin, as I say, inadvertently or whatever, did bring back a spark of something which was sorely lacking for a long time. And again, it's a very powerful thing that the elite actually fear. It's always intrigued me that. But he brought back the idea of the supernatural and the preternatural. The preternatural are powers that are above ordinary powers, which evil has in the Catholic viewpoint, or the Christian viewpoint, or even the ancient world viewpoint, because a lot of it came from the ancient world, remember. Even pre-Judaic, a lot of it. And he brought out Hostage to the Devil, excellently written book, describing people. You can take it from two ways. Either they've got severe mental problems, or they've got there's other forces at work here, entities, something in a secular society folk don't want to contemplate. It's astonishing how they'll accept through dramas and movies, fictional movies, mass slaughters. It's horrible, something incredibly horrible. But when it comes to what's behind these mass horrors, is it just human nature? Are we so defective a species? Or is there something else at play? So Malachi Martin brought back this idea of the supernatural. Supernatural is something that comes from the Creator, you see. Supernatural is supposed to be preternatural. Anything created by the Creator, therefore, has, like rebellious demons or angels, have these abilities, but they're not so much super, that they're definitely above what any humans can do, but they're preternatural. And that was the difference. And he brought back into the church the idea, something that they were forgetting. And you're living in a world of forces. We can accept the fact that there are forces at work when it comes to, secular forces, or you don't know who the people are generally or whatever, but you know they're. Yeah. But the fact is, no, what is in them? And one of his talks, he did touch on someone he'd worked with for a long time, for quite a few years in fact, till one day he saw him in a particular angle in a library they were working, and he realized he was looking at something who was perfectly possessed. Something, a very interesting concept. Doesn't matter what you think of it or believe in it, but just take it from what he said. He said that he confronted the guy about it, and the guy realized before he said anything that Martin had noticed it, because these things, remember, have abilities. They have these psychic abilities, and there was no big argument or a row erupted over it or anything, but. It was acknowledged that the guy, he'd had it for years and years and years. And he was perfectly content with this thing abiding within him. And you see, this kind of thing rings a bell. It could be like Jung said, who knows? Everybody's got their points of view. But there's such a thing as archaic symbology, archetypal symbology, something that rings true in all of us when we see certain things or experience certain things that shouldn't. When you get a chill running up your spine when a certain thing is mentioned or a certain place is reached and you know something's happened, or you didn't know beforehand, but you do know now. You've all had these odd happenings. And suddenly, as I say, inadvertently perhaps, who knows? It brought back into the church something they'd forgotten about. And he did say something true, regardless of the fact that he'd sold out. He said, He said the church, like all institutions, right, become corrupt. They all do. Become lazy. It's not new. It's been done before. In all churches, in all religions, where you get a class that devolves out of it, living on the rest, that becomes fat and lazy, and they expect it to be the normal, that this is the way, you see. They forget what they're there for. Francis of Assisi had the same problem. He came back after years being away, after setting up a lot of the monasteries, and to see his own monks basically fat, and they were getting big endowments from generally widowed women, and leaving all the money to them, and they were fat and lazy, and he walked off again. He was so disgusted. What happened to them? So there's nothing new in it. It happens through all institutions. Even if you could get, well, they do it with communism, eh? It's supposed that they clean out the system, then they put their own people in who are fanatics. Within that generation, they're all corrupt, just like the previous ones. Doesn't matter what you want to call them. That's what happens. So anyway, this is an important thing, and very important thing to touch on, because getting back to chronology, where you must participate in your own deception. Because you think you're going to get something out of it. Then what's happening in your lives and to the world in general is the biggest deception we've ever lived through right now. And you really see it happening. And you see the fruits of it. And the fruits, again, it's almost like demonology, where things will wither very quickly, including the fruit itself. But what's awfully important is the one thing that churches had forgotten, especially Protestant churches, because Protestant churches were completely hand in hand with science, from their logic again, and so they were easily converted right off the bat, you see, into the idea of, oh no, it's just, they can pray and all the rest, but no, don't believe in it too deeply, And there's no central command. In Protestantism, hundreds and hundreds of, there's still new sects dividing yet from previous divisions. And that's another thing when there's no central command, you see. It's all the same system running it all. But from the days of communism, you had the communists themselves laying out what they had to destroy. But the top was religion. Because people, they won't stand and fight for basically a secular idea. You can't get them all to fight, you see. But you can get more of them, and almost all of them may fight for religion or a belief. Especially a God-given belief. With God-given rights. Well, who's going to oppose God-given rights? Well, look who's doing it today. The World Organization, from the start, they got to end this for religious purposes. They've been at that for years and years. Really? It's an awful nuisance, this God-given thing. You've got rights by your creator. You're born with them. And these characters are there to persuade you to give them all up to them. Mao Zedong. You read Mao Zedong in China, said the same thing. He wasn't scared. He wasn't scared at all. He says all power comes from the barrel of a gun, he says. But he said what did frighten him the most was a big idea. What he was referring to was religion. When the communists took over the Soviet system, they went to slaughter. They got the worst beasts imaginable in human form to do the slaughtering. That continued throughout this whole Soviet Union's period, by the way, and all the Soviet bloc countries. Horrible things were done. And that they wipe out religion especially. They went to town to try to eradicate it. You saw it in the Spanish Revolution too, so-called Civil War. There's really communists behind that too. And what they did to the nuns. Or Trotsky's train, when he was head of the Red Army in the reign of terror in Russia. And he had actually priests dangling on ropes at the back of the train, as they went past all the different villages and stuff. Never changes. Never changes. So communism always hammered at it. It was the first target of the French Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution, going on to the long-term Russian Revolution, the Soviet era. And here Israel again, eh? Same thing. Do you look at the characters you see on television or in the news spouting what they're spouting today? Do you want to have them as your supreme leaders and the supreme being over you? Do you really, don't you feel a bit of trepidation when you look at them and listen to them? Today, especially? You better hear the warnings and motivate yourselves, because everyone here is involved. Everybody's involved right now. And you're all going to get the ultimatum given to you individually. You know that. You know, I look at different authors and the lives of some of these authors, like Aldous Huxley, a man who obviously was up there in the planning. He was in because of his family connections and the big agenda. That's why he came out with Brave New World, that science would dominate and control, and that's all there would be. No mention of a supreme being or anything above that sort of thing. Some deity, some god. And Brave New World, it was just purely secular, and science running everything, right down to the breeding of people. And the non-human births, even air pregnancies, really, everybody's grown in a test tube to an extent, and sperm and ovum came out of the same selected batches over and over. They'd been altered to perfection, supposedly. So you had the division of labor, the communistic division of labor, for those who don't know about that. That's what the alpha, the betas, etc. Were designed to do. And the alphas at the top were the natural leaders. They were designed to be the leaders. And there's alpha plus as well. But all the way down the way, right down, the division of labor was done right down to menial tasks for certain types. And therapies and drugs, naturally, to keep people in line. If the ones at the bottom with their monotonous tasks and repetitive tasks, etc. An advanced civilization that they created. But there's no mention anywhere of any particular deity. Religion had been abolished pretty well. The closest thing to it was in the books from the savages. Some of the savages outside their huge, supposed magnificent utopias, the cities outside it was the savages, remnants of the old ones who were born naturally and things like that, very primitive people, who said. And one of them, the main character in the book, the savage, that they brought into the city to show him off, had read Shakespeare and other books too. He was talking about beauty and love, and the people couldn't imagine that. He was mixing with the betas and so on. They were too happy doing their own thing, free sex, different partner every night. In fact, it was illegal, I think, to have the same partner twice a week. Very important, you see, no bond. You can't, if you bond to anybody, you could be a problem now there's two of you against the state, perhaps. It's much easier when it's just you and the state's against you. So a family is taboo. But they bring him in and they kind of laugh at him and see, I think it's kind of quaint with these old-fashioned ideas of bonding and bringing up children yourselves and all that. But they couldn't relate to him at all. But really, when you think about it, what it was showing you is that artificial humans have been altered, literally altered, genetically altered, to be created, to be what they are by humans. Weren't really different. They weren't the same human as the savage at all. He was natural, and they were not. They were unnatural. What really changes? You're back into the same area, whether you like it or not, of Not just philosophy, but religions going back for thousands and thousands, maybe even millions, who knows, of years, of the questions that are asked about life in itself. And it always comes down to the same thing, that which is different from you. Different. Humanly different, And that takes me back again in a circle to the idea of all those that work in the realm of Conology. Back to Conology again. You must participate in your own deception. The armies of people paid big money from your tax money to lie to you and convince you and deceive you and manipulate you and nudge you into doing that which perhaps is not in your interest to do, your best interest to do. On behalf of your government that dishes out the cash to these agencies with the instructions. Are you content being lied to? This is not conspiracy stuff. I've given the articles out for years, and even the recent ones, within the SAGE units, the nudge units, etc. And the Yale one right now, it's ongoing right now with all its different levels of how to convince the public to do what they're told using psychology. Right down to scolding and getting other people to point fingers at you. They're not quite there. And to use all shaming techniques, all these terrible things, to make you obey and comply. And yet you're supposed to be an individual being here. You're either free or you're not free. I hope you understand the difference. If you want to define what freedom means, or chained, not free. If you're truly free, and the rights of a free person, what's the first lie they tell you to take those rights from? Well, you see, you could be endangering others because you're not. No, that's called tyranny, folks. It's been used before. It always ends up in a horror show. We know this from history. And getting back to what we're talking about, to the same guy, this goes round. See, my mind goes in circles, because Malachi Martin talked about these characters again, like from the one he talked about in the library that he'd known for years, without maybe at the back of his mind he suspected something as almost a subconscious, or not even something on the fringe. It's not into the consciousness yet, but there's something there, and then it hits you one day. But look at all these folk that run the world, the ones who sit up there and lord over the general public with this air of superiority. All the top CEOs, as they mandate the world they're bringing in on behalf of their masters, because they do have masters, these multimillionaire characters. They have masters, all right. You better believe it. And what are these masters? Where's it leading to, You don't have to, it's always been there. What I'm saying now has been said for thousands of years. But he talked about the perfectly possessed. Now, I'm sure psychiatrists can go off and pontificate for weeks about the same thing. If they want to, fine, let them do it. I don't care. But I've experienced people like that who definitely have something in them. I have no problems with that at all, of understanding it and seeing it. And it's very real. And you have to say, are they simply just psychopaths? I remember, I've told folk this over the years, if you draft up a list of signs and symptoms of the psychopath, of the nature and traits of the psychopath, and you list down the signs and symptoms of the possessed, it's pretty well the same. In psychiatry, they've got this big puzzle. Oh, psychopaths are puzzles. Really? Are they really such? Because again, in religion, you don't say they're a puzzle. They're quite understandable. There's something in them. They don't react to horror the same way as we do. That's why they can commit such horror and sleep at night, because they have no conscience. Where's the other workplace, you've been taught about something that hates humankind so much. It's the same way. Well, guess where, eh? I'm just bringing all these things up because you've got to ponder them. You really have to ponder them. Because you're living in such deception today, really evil deception, where when you uncover it and it's eventually admitted to, yes, we are paying all these psychopaths to brainwash you and lie to you and deceive you to get what we want for the greater good. I'm Alan Watt. I'm from Ontario, Canada, Northern Ontario, where I live or exist. It's good night. May your God or your gods go with you.